in a series of conversations about the South Door and the Organ Project. I am really delighted to be speaking to members of the congregation as part of this. And so I am here with Finna. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Finna Ayres. I was trained as an architect, but I was so delighted as I slowed down slightly with my career to work here as site manager for almost 15 years. It was a wonderful experience to work here. Some of it was difficult, but it was a great place to work. And I'm very grateful to have been alive long enough to see finally the beginning of our Wren project, because I worked on that with Charles Headley unsuccessfully for some years, which was disappointing, but I'm very glad it fell through what we were proposing to do.
And the Wren project overall now, there's a real step forward because we've knocked a massive hole in the wall intentionally on the German Street side to reconnect the building to the south side of the parish, to reconnect Wren's vision
with Square.
Yeah, exactly. To reconnect Wren's vision with the future and with our present moment. And I wonder what you think about the South Door in particular and what it might be like from a community, from a congregation, from an architectural point of view. If you imagine yourself coming up and walking through it, what might that feel like for you?
I think it might feel wonderful because I usually drive to come here. I'm ashamed to say to all my green colleagues. And I come up facing the middle of that south elevation. And so I always see that. I've always seen that there was the ghost of a door there.
Yes, exactly, with the little angel figure above and the keystone.
So I'm delighted that's going to be open. And I think one of the main benefits, which is not really architectural, but I suppose it is that it's south. So the sun will pour in through that. When we open the doors, the sun will pour into the whole church and be lovely. So I'm very pleased about that. I'm quite intrigued at how you've repositioned the memorials that were on that bit of wall.
Yeah, and that's part of what I'm curious about from your point of view as well. So there are 5 memorials that, of course, in themselves were repositioned at various points. Lots of the memorials in and around St. James's across the centuries have moved for various reasons. And so at this point in the life of St. James's, we have repositioned, we've moved 5 more. And each of them tells the story of multiple lives in very different ways because of who commissioned them, because of how the wording fits together and the way in which people's lives are described, and because of the lives themselves and the way in which they ripple out into communities of faith and communities of society and politics of all sorts. And they're so global. And so there's one in particular that I know where you were involved with creating it, with bringing it back to life, because it was a new 21st century memorial to replace one that had been destroyed, right? So there was originally a memorial to McGilvery, and we don't have it anymore?
I thought you were talking about Mary Beale, because the same happened to Mary Beale. Her grave was destroyed and her... So,
yes, yeah.
I worked on 3 similar rectangular stones which go in the spandrel underneath the window. That was designed to have a whole set of them eventually, if people wanted to go around or underneath all the windows, because all those spandrels are vacant at the moment.
And now there are 3.
Now we've got 3 on the north wall. Yeah. Starting, the first one was for Mary Beale, and that was unveiled and sort of blessed by Germaine Greer. There was
Germaine Greer?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And for those who are listening who don't know the story of Mary Beale in the way that St. James's congregation and others do, who was Mary Beale?
She was the first woman to earn her living through painting portraits, and her husband supported her. He kept all the books, he ground all the colours, and kept a recipe for the different colours.
And she worked with her sons as well. It was such a family business.
Yes, and she painted her sons, and her sons helped her. You can tell with the paintings that she does the face and the hands, and you can tell that the boys were doing the arms.
And definitely the drapery. There was a recent Mary Beale exhibition at Philip Mould, and they found out that she lived pretty much there in Pall Mall.
Yes.
And Mary Beale died in 1699, so she would have been well established in this area as the church was being built.
Yes.
And then when it opened in 1684, one of the things that I imagine, because of where she lived on the south side of the parish really, is that she would have walked through that south door.
She would have done, yes, that's quite right. Yes, well,
amazing.
One of the things that Mary Beale said, that Germaine Greer said, which I thought was great, was that Mary Beale didn't know she was the first woman. She was just doing what she wanted to do.
I love that. She was just doing her job.
Yes, and she had no idea that she was being significant.
Oh, that's interesting. And she was very economically successful in her own time. As far as I know, one of the reasons why her husband was working on different kinds of chemical solutions to challenges with working with paint is because she needed her paintings to dry faster because she had so much work on.
Yes.
So that's, to me, that's a really wonderful thing. And the way that text works in memorials is also something that really fascinates me. And with those 3 memorials, what kinds of choices were being made about text, how to describe people, what to say? I wondered whether or not that might be connected to what might be known archivally of what the original memorial looked like, or did this work have to be done in a new way, in a fresh way for the 3 of them?
I wasn't conscious of any historical research about the Mary Beale tablet, or the McGillivray one.
Yeah, and that's William McGillivray,
yeah.
where he's one of the 5 that's moved from the south door over to the Piccadilly north side of the church, which is one of the sort of springboards for the conversation that we're having. So the McGillivray one, we don't know what the original memorial said. Is that right?
No, we don't. And we had to. We did some quite serious editing about certain facts of his life, in that his wealth and his fame began with the fur trade. He was a great administrator, but that's where the money came from, was the fur trade. So we didn't put that in.
Why did you decide to edit it? Because especially with memorials recently, there's that phrase, contested heritage, where it's possible to learn a lot about someone's life, and in the memorial itself, it's quite a small block of stone for a whole life. Some of them are very long, some of them are short, but there's a question always about what is and isn't said.
Yes, well, there were only 3 lines. We only have room for 3 lines on those things. So we missed that out, and we also missed out that when he was in Canada, he had a local Cree wife. Now that may sound bad, but the good effect of this was that he treated the first people there with great respect and, I guess, fondness. I think that he was well respected by them. Which,
what do you think especially as a Canadian myself, we've talked about this before, I come from effectively like a white colonial family, especially on my mother's side in British Columbia. And so that's something that coming from there and having that heritage in my own ancestry, I think about a lot. And I grew up in Canada in the 80s and the 90s before I came here, where there was, I would say, a kind of fragmentary, partial view and a curiosity and an openness, as well as the beginnings of what's now been a real deep quest and a longing for justice and for deeper understanding, and also for a deeper understanding of the level of pain and suffering and shock and trauma that Indigenous peoples sustained and experienced and went through in different ways in Canada. So that, just as someone who comes from there, is something that I contend with. And I hadn't really noticed the William McGillivray Memorial all that much for quite a while. I arrived here in 2022, and then I think it was probably after a morning prayer service in the side chapel, and I walked past it and I spend some sort of dwell time, as sometimes they say, with it. And I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, that is the McGillivray whose name is all over Canada, like streets and schools and all sorts. And I thought, how is he described here and why might that be? And so I'm so glad that I now know a little bit about the St. James's story that's connected to his history here locally, and to what, as with many memorials, is and is not said in the tablet, and then is and is not, as in the memorial in the stone itself, and then is and is not said in the records that we have, which is always partial for any life. and the way that his story intertwines with ours in this local community, it kind of blew my mind. And as you can tell from what I'm sharing, it still does, where I think, oh my gosh, what can be said and explored, and what anyone in any time chooses to share in the letter cutting, in the stone, in a memorial. I'm always fascinated by that, and it's amazing that you were part of that process.
It was a very good process because I had never heard of Piccadilly. I was contacted by email with this man I'd never heard of from Thunder Bay.
Yeah, Thunder Bay, Ontario too. His name is Rodney Brown, right?
Asking if we could do it. And it went through a lot of discussions with the then rector, Charles Headley, and we had to get it, apply all of those memorials. You have to apply for a faculty, which, as you know, is a long, drawn-out process. And
yes, it's complex.
And they can Sorry, are we running out?
No, not at all. I'm just checking that it's recording. We're all good. Carry on.
What was I saying? I forgot.
About the faculty and the approval process.
Oh, yes, and so we had to be... I was afraid that if we put things in like the fur trade and the Cree wife, it would not be acceptable to the powers that be in the Church of England.
Which is fascinating now, because you may well be right, where you think, oh, it must be a celebratory memorial which avoids controversy. We're in such a different place now, but I think those debates are still so active.
Well, yes, and I think something that I feel very strongly is that it's been fascinating to interweave the past with the present, and I'm delighted to hear that the gravestones from the Paddington excess grave place. What was it called?
The additional burial grounds.
The additional burial grounds.
Because it wasn't possible to bury people here anymore.
And they're all going to arrive on our south wall. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I'm so pleased about that.
The idea is that there are only a few, but a few really rather extraordinary ones.
Yes.
Chosen for a variety of reasons. Diversity of local community histories, the condition and the age of the memorials.
We had a wonderful service here where we had models of the people who had been celebrated in that.
Yes,
do you remember that?
Museum of London Archaeology, MOLA, and that was a couple of years ago.
Wonderful, that
where
service.
we had sort of cardboard three-dimensional figures just sitting in the pews. What was that like for you, being
wonderful.
so engaged with St. James's history?
Absolutely wonderful. I loved it. And I think memorialising the past is so important, and it makes me really want to memorialise our present on behalf of the future, so that we can offer up our everyday people here. I long for us in this Wren project to incorporate some system for modest memorials for people who are not rich and famous and high achievers, but just somebody who was very much cared for by somebody in the congregation. When I was here as site manager, I should think every 3 months someone would come up to me and said, I'd like to remember my mother, what can we do? Certainly the first time I spoke to the man who became my husband he came up to me and wanted to memorialise his mother.
Oh, yeah. I wonder what you think of the Che Lovelace paintings and the way that we were speaking earlier about that moment for the 250th anniversary of the baptism of Kwabna Ottobokagwano, and that there's a memorial in church now, so it's almost a kind of a double intervention in contemporary life at St. James's now that looks back to the past but doesn't leave it in the past and then incorporates it into present and also for the future. What's your experience of that in terms of what you've been reflecting on for a long time, and the idea of lives whose stories might not be told or visible and yet are utterly incorporated into the fabric of this place every day, past, present and future?
Well, I'm very pleased we had the paintings done and the other memorial. I wish you could read that memorial a bit more clearly. When you're sitting in the pew, you want to be able to read it, and you can't unless you go right up to it. Please emphasise the lettering somehow, St. James, please. But I really want some method of continuing this wonderful history of tying people with the building and the space. And I'm sure that the love we have for this place will actually carry it through, and everybody coming after us will find it.
Yeah. When we spent time in the church earlier, I, in a sort of sentimental but also really very serious, quite solemn as well as joyful way, mentioned to you how much I love this building and this place as a sacred place, and how much I love the people as a priest here, as well as someone who is very connected with the life of architecture, art, craft, and the transformation of spaces in terms of beauty, dignity, justice. We share that in common, I think. You've been here for a long time. When you think of St. James's as a space, as a building, what do you think about? How does it make you feel?
It's actually very personal. It goes right back to my parents. My parents met at the Royal Academy. One was a painter, one was a sculptor.
A painter and a sculptor, that's beautiful.
And they used to come here for the varnishing day services. And it was a church that my parents were very conscious of, not being particularly Christian, although they spent their lives making the iconography of the church, crucifixes and Madonnas and goodness knows what.
Wow.
And also, my father carved the war memorial on the Royal Academy in Burlington House, the entrance.
Really?
There's a memorial to the First World War, and then there's a sort of bit at the bottom for the Second World War, which my father did.
And your father did those?
Yes, his name's there, Arthur Ayres. He put his name on it.
I will go to the Royal Academy today. I will go this afternoon and I will look at that and I will think of you. And this connection between the Royal Academy and St. James's is long and deep.
Yes.
And so you are enfolded in multiple generations into this place and this time.
Absolutely. And the Academy and St. James's it's one of the reasons of coming to Piccadilly. I never go to Fortnum and Masons and other things like that. I come from Royal Academy and St. James's. And I consider myself very fortunate in having such a connection.
If you had, by way of conclusion, something that you wanted to share, not just with the congregation, but with the public as a whole, all these conversations, they're online, they're on YouTube, anyone and everyone can listen to them. If you wanted to share in this moment, today, sitting inside the St. James's precincts with a view of the church through the clear glass windows beyond, if you want to say anything at all to whoever, whether they know St. James's or not, what would you want to share?
I would say, come and stand in the middle of this building and be quiet and stand in the nave. And look to the grinning gibberns and look out of the clear windows. And turn around and look at our new south door, which will be here. And you will feel something.
Yes.
Give it the time and you will find some deep sense of peace and homecoming.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for this conversation. These experiences are ones that hold us as we hold them, and yes. I am so glad that you wanted to come and to be part of this today. Thank you.
You're very welcome.